Hey guys, this is Mark Goldberg from Mark Vlogs Watches. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me today. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of this particular video and what's going to happen with the gray market here in Rolex during 2020, before we jump right into that, let's get the quick fist watch check out of the way, and here it is. Today, I am not wearing a Rolex at all. I'm wearing a Doxa. And you know what? Perhaps that's fitting because we're about to dox Rolex and the gray market. Now, recently I made a video about what was going to happen to Rolex supply during 2021, and you might want to have a look at that. I will throw a link to that video in the description here. Let me quickly recap because it's going to have major impact on what happens to the gray market for Rolex, the aftermarket, in the same year. My source, a mole that I have buried deep within the bowels of Rolex in Geneva, Switzerland, Moneypenny, has reported that COVID and other factors have tightened the supply of Rolex watches through most of 2020. So we should expect only trickles of steel sports making their way into the Rolex authorized dealer over the course of the year. So if in fact you are watching this, and if you are an authorized dealer, this is probably very similar to what you are hearing from your Rolex representative, or perhaps your rep isn't really even able to communicate this to you directly, but you've got an inside source, you've got a friend. Moneypenny tells us. It's going to be a tough year if you want to buy a Rolex at MSRP through the authorized dealer. And if you are an authorized dealer, boy, you know, it's tough because you've got all the overhead. That doesn't really go down. But now you don't have as much of the inventory that you want to sell. So guys, collectors, fellows, watch friends, watch nerds, watch obsessive, all I want to tell you guys is, you know, in a lot of cases, it's not the fault of the authorized dealer. In fact, in terms of supply, it's never the fault of the authorized dealer. Now, do some of these guys feed the gray market? Well, yes, in fact, we know that to be the case. Certainly they do in Asia and perhaps in other parts of the world too. Okay, we know this. But let's talk about what's going to happen as Rolex supplies get super tight, continue to remain tight, and demand soars because they had a bunch of cool new introductions right at the end of 2020 for the new year of 2021. They created an extreme amount of excitement with all this new stuff, and you know, now you can barely get your hands on it unless you go to the gray market, which is of course what we're going to be talking about. Also remember that Rolex has an incredibly heavy marketing budget. Okay, they spend approximately $100 million per year on advertising and marketing, creating demand. So you're talking about in any given decade nearly $1 billion with a B as in oh baby. So they are spending an incredible amount of money to make you want stuff that you basically can't get, unless, of course, you go to the gray market. So I've got a notebook here, and I made a few notes, just a quick cursory look at aftermarket sellers right now. The first watch that we're going to talk about is one that I hope to acquire one day, and that is the Daytona. Whether you get the black dial or the white panda version, the reference number is 116500LN for Lunette Noire, black bezel, black ceramic bezel. MSRP on this watch is what I would consider to be, for what it is, a very reasonable $13,150. Now, some of you are going to quibble with me in the comments about what I consider to be a reasonable price. I know that there are watches that may sell for less, such as certain Zenith watches that have maybe more complicated or more horologically significant movements than what the Rolex Daytona has. But in the overall scheme of things, especially considering what these guys go for in the aftermarket, that $13,150 MSRP seems like a bit of a bargain. Now, I was watching some older videos by a bunch of YouTubers who you know and love. For example, Federico made a video about 3 years ago in which he said that he really liked the Daytona, but damned if he was going to pay $18,000, I think it was at the time, on the aftermarket for that watch, because at that point, I want to say that the MSRP on the Daytona was somewhere in the $12,500 range. And I also watched a video by Eric. This was an older video in which he said he would be damned if he was going to pay $15,000 for that watch, which was only $3,000 in terms of a premium. But the concept of that premium just offended him. Now, before we move on, a couple quick housekeeping points. First, please throw a like on this video. And also, don't blame me. Look, I am not here trying to tell you that the gray market is a good thing, that these prices are good. So do me a favor, like and subscribe and do all that YouTube-y stuff. But I also want you to put into the comments what your feelings are about this whole situation, because it's a bit of a mess, isn't it? Anyway, what I'm thinking is both Eric and Federico, if they could go back in time, I think not only would they say, heck, you know what, let me pay that $3,000 to $5,000 premium, but how many of them can I buy? Can I buy 10 of them? Can I buy 20 of them? Hindsight is absolutely 20/20, guys. So the question is, where are these prices going now? Well, I remember looking at them only a few months ago, and the Daytona had a massive premium on it. It went from $13,150 at retail, and it was selling for $25. And then I blinked, and it was $28. And then I blinked, and you know what it's selling for right now? $30, $29, $30, $32. I think 30 is the right number as of like today anyway. And today is 22 January 2021. So we're just at the beginning. We're just at the very beginning of this year. And the Rolex Daytona is selling for way more than double its MSRP, $30,000. And just a few years ago, Eric, who really knows the market really well, was saying, darn if I want to go pay $15,000, and now it doubled. So the question is, what's going to happen to it next? Well, we'll talk about that after we move through another couple of different Rolex models. So let's go from like sort of the top of the range, which is the Daytona, one of the fancier watches they make, and let's go to the bottom of the Rolex range, and let's talk about the Oyster Perpetual in 41 millimeters particularly, even though it's also available in 36. I gotta say, the fact that Rolex could make an Oyster Perpetual that even catches my attention is fairly amazing, because for many years it was the most boring part of the line. It's just a three-hander, nothing particularly special about it. It's a Rolex, it had an Oyster case, still does, it was robust, as they all are in the sports line, but nonetheless, it was just, like a basic, very boring design. Never really caught my attention, was nothing that I ever thought I would look at. And then they bumped its size up to 41 millimeters and came out with these gorgeous Stella dial colors. They made it fun, they made it crazy, they made it a little wild. And as you could tell by my Doxa orange, I kind of like the funky stuff, and as the surroundings show, I kind of like colorful, funky things, which, by the way, the Rolex Oyster Perpetual has a color very similar to this. They call it coral, okay? But nonetheless, what happened is Rolex really made people take second notice of the Oyster Perpetual line, which had never happened before. And I think they had full intentions of making them. And in fact, they are making them. It's just they're making a dribble of them. You can barely get them. Almost impossible to get one at the authorized dealer. What's the MSRP and the reference number? Well, on the OP41, the Oyster Perpetual 41 millimeter, its reference number is 123400. And its MSRP is a very reasonable for what it is, $5,900. Okay, but here's the thing. The really boring black dial one, you can get it for $8,000, $9,000 on the gray market. But you want to start getting into cool colors, like the turquoise. My favorite one actually isn't the one that looks coral. My favorite one is the turquoise one. And that's more like $14,000. Now, I'm going to tell you what, guys, about a month ago, it was $12,000, but it just popped up to 14. And if you want to get some of like the green, the yellow, you can get them for 10 or 12, but that turquoise one has just popped up. So it's just the gray market seems to be making hay while the sun will shine. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And let's wrap this up with a couple of Submariners. First, let's talk about just the normal black version of the Submariner. They bumped that up to 41 millimeters now. And its MSRP, well, its reference number is 126610 LN. And its MSRP is $9,150, which seems like a decent deal for a Submariner. But the problem is, go ahead and get one. Chances of getting one right now at the authorized dealer are really, really difficult. And that's because they are receiving them, guys, but they're just receiving very, very few of them. So it's really hard for them to satisfy even a fraction of the people that are asking for it, let alone their good customers who, have supported the stores over the years, right? So Again, MSRP on just the regular standard 41 millimeter Submariner is $9,150. But on the gray market right now, those are in the $14,000, $15,000 range. So it's a pretty hefty premium there. But holy cow, now we got to talk about the Kermit, the second version of the Kermit. I don't know. I think I'm calling it the Kermit, which is the, it's sort of like the big brother or the newer brother, the younger brother to my Hulk, all right? And what it is it's a 41 millimeter black dial Submariner with a lunette vert, a green, a green ceramic bezel. Its reference number is 126610LV. Let's call it the Kermit, or what do you call it? Tell me in the comments. What should I be calling this thing? Its MSRP is $9,550, okay? So it's only $400 more than the black one. That's kind of like, sounds like a bargain, doesn't it? Except for, you can't get one. Very hard to get. The frustrating thing, by the way, is right before Christmas, authorized dealers received like a sort of like a, a spurt of these watches, of all of these watches that we're describing right now, and then the faucet turned off. They were able to, sell a bunch of watches just in time for last Christmas, but then they're receiving very, very few of the really good things. Okay, so back to the Kermit. Its retail price is $9,550. Guys, on the gray market, that watch is going for $20,000. That is more than double. What is going on here? What is going on here? Well, here's my prediction. As Rolex supplies tighten, Rolex gray marketeers are going to go into profit-making mode. Okay, they remind me a little bit of these places that know a hurricane is coming and that everybody's going to need to board up their windows. So they're profiteering, they're gouging, okay? They're taking a sheet of plywood that should sell for $20 and now they want to sell it for $100. This is essentially what's happening. Now, is it fair? It's, it's Keynesian economics. It's absolutely got to do with supply and demand. If there was no demand for Rolex watches, then the gray market would be just selling them off the way they sell used Omega watches. Okay, you can buy an Omega Seamaster for $4,000, $3,950 probably, and it's a fantastic watch, and it's probably even slightly better on some level than the Submariner is. If you take resale and brand cachet, if you knock those down a little bit. Sadly, guys, don't shoot the messenger. Please throw a like on this video anyway and subscribe if you haven't already done so, but I think it's going to get a lot worse. Where? Okay, well, here are my predictions. I think the Daytona, it's going to 40. Honest to God. I think the Daytona by when? I think by fall. I think by fall, you can hold me to this. We'll find out if I'm right, okay? By, let's say, October 2021, I think the Daytona, particularly the Panda, is going to be selling for $38,000 to $40,000. I think the Oyster Perpetual, the cool colors, the hard to get ones, the coral colored one and the turquoise one particularly, I think those are going to be going for in the vicinity of $16,000 to $18,000. I think the black Submariner, it's going to leap from $15,000 up to $18,000. And I think the Kermit is going up to $26,000. Now, I'm not happy about this because I like watches and I like to be able to buy watches. And these prices are, absolutely unaffordable for all but those who have just incredible money and don't really care. Will you get hurt if you buy at these prices? Well, I mean, if I'm right about everything and you buy a Daytona at 30, okay, which all your friends are going to make fun of you in the forums, but if you do that, if you buy a Daytona for 30 and then you sell it 6 months later for 35, no, you're not going to get hurt at all. But if you miss the timing of this, yeah, you could get hurt, because if you buy on the gray market and if you have to sell anytime quickly, I think it's going to be very hard to do that and get out all of your money. Remember, the resellers have got to allow room in their purchases, right? They got to refurbish these things a little bit and then they got to make a profit. So They specialize in buying low and selling high, and I'll tell you what, guys, the market is high. High, high, high. It's no darn fun right now for collectors. It's more like I'm taking a sit and wait attitude. Certainly, I advise you to be very careful about paying gray market prices for watches right now. But if you're a speculator, if you are bold, if you are brave, if you are sitting on a ton of cash, buy a couple of Daytonas right now, hold on to them, and see if you can't flick them in about 6 months. Or better yet, leave those watches for somebody who will actually wear them and love them and enjoy them. I don't know. I think that collecting requires us sometimes to have to sell watches because you don't want to continue to buy more and more and more and more, because before long you turn around and your watch collection is worth more than your car and it's approaching the value of your house. And so we have to recycle those dollars. That's why I occasionally sell a watch, so that I can invest it in something new that I think I might equally enjoy. But the gray market, I'm priced out of it right now. How about you guys? What do you think is going to happen? I told you what I think is going to happen to supply. Now I'm telling you what I think is going to happen on the gray market. It is going to be very grim. Finally, I think that when the whole situation is over and Rolex starts to pump up the volume, I think prices are going to stabilize and then fall. But I don't think we're going to see that for about another year. Tell me what you think in the comments. This is Goldberg. Peace out.
Paint the sky.